Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. I'm just going to continue my lecture for this professional management course. So in the previous lecture, I've talked about the definition of the project and what are the characteristics of a project and the importance of project management. So in order to execute a project, you should have a very good project management. There are also importance to have the effective project and management or project managers skills. So here are some of the skills for effective project management. So in order for you to be able to make sure that um, the 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 implementation of the project is to have an effective project management. Number one, here you can see you should have the ability to resolve conflict because in the earlier lecture, I've mentioned about the complexity of the project scenario where it involves a number of humans resources. It involves a number of technologies. It involves lots of complication. So it is very important for the project manager to be able to resolve some of the conflict which will occur during the implementation of the project. And it is also you should have some creativity in solving some of the problem in order for the project to be successful. Some people, they are very strict in terms of their decision making. So it is not good because at the end of the day, you have certain objectives to be achieved in this project. So the flexibility of your decision making in terms of the rules implication need to be decided or discussed in terms of how the project can be implemented. So the flexibility of you managing people's around you or under you in order for you to make them comfortable with what they are doing. And of course, in project we have start and the end of the project. So sometimes there are needs to be able to do some adjustment of the duration of the project. And within some of the project, there are so many activities involved, so many tasks involved. So each of the tasks has their own duration time. It has its own objective that need to be achieved. So in order to be flexible, you should be able to also to ability to adjust some changes, especially if it's involved design, it's involved technology. So it is necessary to make some changes to make sure that the end product can be produced. And of course, you must have the ability to plan the project accordingly to make sure that the project can be completed based on the time restriction. So good planning of the project, good estimation of the implementation of the project, good structure, and also determination of the human skills and technology is very important in planning. And you should be able to also have the ability to perform some negotiations, negotiate with the vendor and negotiate with your client or your customers or your workers. It can be either win-win situation, win or lose situation, or sometimes it can be lose-lose situation. But at the end of the day, you are responsible to make sure that the implementation of the project can be done successfully within the time duration given. So in terms of negotiation, of course, as a project manager, as a leader, you have a little bit of authority, but it's depending on your negotiation skills to gain the cooperation of departments or the workers in the organization, to make sure that some of the tasks, some of the process within the project can be implemented. You have the power, you have the right to make some of the decisions, right? This example of, if you find some workers a bit slow in performing their task, then you should go and to have a face-to-face discussion with the workers and discuss what are their problems, what are the things that you can do to help them work and to help them complete the task given to them. So of course, each departments or each team members have their own objective, priorities, and as well as personal problems. So you should be able to negotiate some of the personal issues faced by the human resource in order to smooth all the process that's needed for the project. And of course, the project is not their responsibilities in terms of all the team members. It is the responsibility of you as a project manager. So it is your responsibility to make sure all the things or the leftovers of the project need to be processed accordingly. So there are three constraints in any of the project or the main goals of project management. Number one is the scope. So you have to determine clearly what are the scope of the project, what are the main objectives of the project. So this scope must be completed, or this the scope or objective must be successfully achieved at the end of the project implementation. So once you have finalized the scope of the project, then you need to identify how long of the project or what are the duration of the project that's needed to be implemented. And of course, the resources in terms of human resources, the facilities, all need financial support. So it will incur cost. So it is your responsibility to discuss the accepted cost that is needed for this project. So these three constraints need to be triangulated to look into each one of it, whether it is acceptable. You might have a long list of scope that need to be implemented. So you need to find out whether the time or duration of the project is realistic to be implemented. And in terms of the money, the cost, you need to really make a proper prediction or estimation on the total cost of the project. So these are the three main constraints of any project that will be implemented. So you need, in order to have high performance project output, you have to stick to the budget limit to the maximum, and you have to fulfill the due date of the project to be completed. And of course, the specification, the objectives of the project should be fulfilled at the end of the project. So all of the scope, cost, and times should reflect the performance target at the end of the project. So 3 time cost and also the due date and also the required deliverables. So the life cycles of the project, is something that you need to understand. It can have different ways of the nature of the project. So all organisms have a life cycles. So they are born, similar like the project. They are started, they grow, they win, and they die. So do the project. So some projects follows an S-shaped curve, which they start a little bit slowly, and then they develop the momentum, then they will finish slowly. Some other project follow a J-shaped curve. They start really slowly and proceed also slowly, but at the end of the project due time, they can finish it very quickly or rapidly. So there are 4 phases in a typical project management. Number 1, the scope formulation. As mentioned earlier, and here is what are the scope that you wish the project to be achieved at the end. So you have to formulate all the project scope. So this is what they also call project initiations. So you need to initiate the project, identify all the scopes of the requirement and objective of the project. The next will be planning. So it's very important for you to plan it properly, to identify what are the facilities needed, the cost of the whole project, and the number of people involved, who are involved, skills that's needed involved in this project. So once you have identified the organization of the structure, the people, the facilities, the funding, then you will next step is for the execution and the monitoring of the process to achieve the project. So it includes managing the human resources, managing the facilities, and also managing the technologies involved in order to meet the project objective. And in order that you also will perform some control on the process or execution of the project to make sure that some of the activities can be executed successfully. At the end of the day, once you have identified that you have achieved all the objective of the project and all the scope has been fulfilled, then you should be prepared for the closing or termination of the project. So this include setting all the facilities, closing the premises, and preparing all the reports and presentation to your stakeholders or your customers. So all the phases are actually linked sequentially, but they can also overlap because some of the planning can be changed during the execution based on a new finding during the execution. So basically it is sequentially, but it also can also overlap. So the project life cycle, general project life cycles consists of number of activities. Number 1, the initiations. Alright, so this is where the development of the initial goals and technical specification are planned, are determined. So whenever a project going to be started, so you have to identify what are the goals or what are the specification needed at the end of this project that you want to achieve. And the planning of the project, which include all the detailed specification very clearly stated, which is achievable, and with all the planning schedules, people's involved, when we'll start, how long the duration of the project. So these need to be scheduled accordingly. And if it's involved schematic diagram, so you have to make sure that all the schematic diagram in a proper manner, which is readable, which is understandable by the people who's going to execute the project. And then the plans of the project is properly developed to be followed by the people who's going to execute it. And of course, when the initiation has been started and you have a proper planning, and the next task will be the execution and control. So this is where the actual work happen, where it involves people, it involves facilities, it involves machines, it involves technologies, software or hardware which is needed to perform the project. And then the closing termination life cycle, which include the project's transfer to the customers, presenting the overall achieved or targeted goals for the particular project, and then resources reassignment if necessary. So you have lots of people, facility that you need to reassign for other project. And then once everything has been cleared, has been approved by the customers or the stakeholders, then you are able to close the project successfully. So in terms of the implementation, usually the unit that used for project implementation is according to man hours. Man refer to how many people required to perform, and how many hours that is required by that particularly human resource to implement the project. So if you look at initiation phase, that the main hours needed to implement the initiation phase is a little bit low, right? So because you don't need lots of people to do this initiation, to set up the specification, to set up the particularly goals and objectives of the project. So and then after that, the next phase of the project, which is planning, then the number of man hours will be increased. So you need more people, you need more time to implement the planning stages. Okay, since that you have successfully planned the initiation and planning, when you go to the execution stage, it involves more man hours, more people, more time for the project to be executed. So you can see from the graph, it's constantly increasing, all right, up to the maximum level. So of course, during the execution, you will need the whole resources that you can get to make sure that you can achieve the goals set by the project. After around 70 or 80% of the project execution, you can see the main hours started to decrease. That means that you can see some progress where the product or the process is already completed, and the requirement for man hours is reduced, and it will steadily decrease towards the closing stage. So the S curve, as shown in this graph, where you have according to the percentage of project completion, it looks like an S curve, right? So it's quite steadily slow start, and then it started to have a quick momentum of the execution of project. Then you will see some slow finish at the end of the project. So the graph shape looks like alphabet of S. This is an example S curve for a production of a car, where you start with the research phase to determine the goals and the scope of the new car. All right, and here at the planning stage, you will identify or allocate the resources required required for the implementation of this project. And here at this stage, you should consider all the costs required, what are the risks of the project, to avoid the failure of the project, and the time needed to complete it. At the implementation stage here, you will see that the plan schedule has been prepared, and you can start to build or starting the program. At the end of the execution, you will see some of the framework of a car should be available at this stage, where you can start testing or make some demonstration on the functionalities of the scope that you have decided earlier. And then once everything has been cleared, tested, then you can start the production of the car, which will go through at the end of the completion. So this is a typical of the S-curve project to produce a car. There's another scenario of a J-curve project life cycle, where you can see the steep graph, quite exponential graph description, or exponential types of graph, where you have a very slow start and a bit of momentum. At the end, you will see the rapid finish exponentially can be achieved. So in this case, where the time needed to set up machines, and also the slow workers learning curve, which incur this kind of project life cycle. So but once the setup of the machine has been completed, and the workers have picked up all the necessary knowledge to implement the project, and the production will be rapidly increased once everything is set up properly. So this is a project life cycle as compared to S-curve. Of course, in many of the implementation of project, there are some risk that you need to face, or you need to even identify. So there are uncertainties in a project implementation. So some of the example of the uncertainties in a project, for example, you fail to precisely define the scope of the project. So you don't have the details of the project precisely or clearly defined. So at the end, when you execute the project, right, you find out that you don't know where to stop, or don't know whether you have fulfilled the requirement of the project, because the specification or the scope of the project is not defined clearly. The scope of works gets changed or during executions, right? So if some of the cases where previously you thought the job or the activities can be done by maybe 4 people, right? So during the execution, you found out that 4 people is insufficient for the execution. So you might want to speed up the activities by increasing the number of people who works on that particular activities. So the scope of works also change, and number of people also can be increased or changed. Spread out work sites, that means if you working a project infrastructure, so there are number of people involved to work to a different sites of different geographical localities. So they need to travel, so you need time to get them there. So these are the things that will be uncertainties which will affect the time, the end of the project implementation. Resource requirements differ with each task. Although you have given, you have specified the task to be implemented, but however you might underestimate the resource requirement. As I said, maybe you need maybe 4 workers to work for that particular task, and then when you find out that it is quite impossible to complete the task within that particular time, so you need more resources, you need more material also, you need more money or finance to support the extra resources. Very high investment and hence having high risk. So usually in a big project, so the risk is also very high. When it's involved high investment, which also involve high risk as well. So if you trying to set up a project with such huge scope, so you should be prepared with the high risk. Therefore, the backup planning must be clearly or ready, just in case if something's happen, where high risk, that means your high investment, and of course usually this will incur or expecting to have high return. Sometimes technology changes also rapidly, so some technologies can be obsolete. So during the time of execution, the technology that you think which will be used in the project is already obsolete, so you need to get a new technology, and this will incur cost and of course affect the project implementation. And also you might find that you need more time to complete the project due to some of the circumstances. Human resources, you couldn't find the human resources, you couldn't find the facilities to implement it, and also due to availability of key resources, you couldn't find the expertise in that particular areas for you to implement the project. And due to the cost of resources increase due to economic situation, due to political situation, war happenings to some of the countries, which affect the cost of the implementation of the project. So this need to be reconsidered, need to be looked into whether you have the enough sufficient finance to back up in such a scenario. Timing of solutions to technological problems, as I said, technology changes. You need to identify what are the latest technology available, that if some of the facilities or technology that you are unable to obtain. And also due to action taken by the competitors, some of the competitors also producing the same thing, so they have cut the cost of the product, so it will affect the overall cost of your project. Some uncertainties in project can be caused by the site issues, unexplored site geology, due to the geological aspect of the site, and also due to uncertain weather during that time, which which makes some of the activities are unable to be executed. And of course, in Malaysia sometimes there are flood, so the planning of the timing of the particular project during the natural calamities or disasters will also affect the project. Risk sources in project can be break down into a few structures. The one is external risk resources. This is due to external project. It can be due to legal or law, where the local regulation or to obtain some of the permits for your work to be done, and also due to late approvals of your project by the local council, and also due to political changes which affect the decision making by especially the ministers which involved in this particular project. Either they want to, sometimes they want, once you change the minister, they change the scope, they change the cost of the project to be implemented. And also due to war, where you will find some of the difficulties to find some of the materials for your project. And also due to economics scenario, the rising cost of materials and so on. So social also due to due to number of resources of human skill, lack of it, and also due to strikes or whatever. This is actually happen in developed country where there are common strike by the workers. So this is also due to the social risk and also due to the nature, the climate, and fires, earthquake, and flood, and so on. So the second risk is due to internal resources. So due to change of management, sometimes project management or project manager will also be changed. Some of the management of the team members can also be changed, and also due to, as mentioned earlier, the technology. Some of the technology are already obsolete, so you need require a new technology to be used in your implementation. And during implementation, you might find some human factors where your workers experience accident during the implementation. There are also some illness by the workers, so this will affect the human that can work for the project. So during project implementation, you will require some procurement, getting the materials, getting the machines. So you might experience some delay and the reliability of the equipment, it breakdowns regularly. So these are some of the internal risk sources, and based on the contract that change due to the uncertainties between the customers and the stakeholders. So in order to make sure the project can be implemented successfully, so it is very important to be able to estimate some of the risk. So there are ways or methods to estimate. So usually they will use statistics to estimate probabilities of the key parameters which will affect the project implementation. So there are tools where you can use to simulate the project, whether the time duration is enough or is sufficient to implement it. And also you can do some analysis distribution of the outcomes generated by the model. So this either by mathematically and supported by the software tools for you to identify the effectiveness of the project implementation by looking into the risk of the project. So selecting projects to meet organization objectives is mentioned earlier, is very important. So project selection is very important, where it is a process of evaluating projects and choosing them so firm objectives are met, and also to ensure that several conditions are considered when you start to identify a project. So these are some of the questions that you need to answer: whether the project is potentially profitable, so it's worth to be implemented. Number two, whether the project is required, so who's going to benefit out of the project, or you just going to do it without understanding who are the benefit of this project, who will benefit the project. Does your firm or a particular firm have sufficient skills to complete the project? You have enough people, you have enough skills, you have enough facilities, or you have enough technology that you already identify in order to make sure that the project can be implemented. So does the project involve building strategic competency? So during whether your project, while implementing it, you also need to have some you need to build some competencies, which is new competencies, whether you have the skills or whether you have the knowledge to do that. This is also very important selection decision that need to be made. Do you have enough capacity to carry out the project? You have enough people, you have enough machine, you have enough technology to implement it. And can the project be economically successful? Can you identify or come up with more economical ways to complete the project? So these are some of the conditions that any project need to be considered before it can be executed. So in order to make sure whether the project is really worth it to be implemented, there are two ways to implement it, or two ways for you to identify whether it is worth or it is not worth to implement. The number one is using non-numeric methods. So you don't use any numbers. You don't do this based on the numeric value, right? Okay, number two is based on numeric methods. So use numbers to decide whether the project worth to be implemented. So non-numeric methods, there are many ways or terms that they use: the sacred cow, the operating necessity, the competitive necessity, or the product line extension. So for the non-numeric selection methods, these are the methods which are often used when numeric data is scarce or very little, or when certain project aspect cannot easily be quantified. So here are some of the example. They call it a sacred cow. This is a pet project advocated by a senior executive of the firm. So this is a project where it is initiated due to tradition. So it has been done for so many years. So it's a tradition that you have to implement this project, whether it's beneficial or not. Due to tradition, you have to implement it. Also due to the political reasons. So when the general election comes, so it's very necessary to do it with the objective of for the election purposes. Or it can be based on perception that is too important or too deeply entrenched to be questioned or altered. I mean, it's just a matter of they just want to do it for the sake of to implement it. Sometimes we call it top-down instruction. So it is instructed to be done. So it is not based on numbers. You don't based on how much money you will use, how much profit you will get from this project. So this is example of non-numeric selection method. So it just do it. So these are also often used when numeric data is scarce, as mentioned earlier. So based on expert opinion. So because they are the we call it the boss have if you know expert opinion, they know it by their expertise, by their experience. So they thought this is very good project to be implemented. So based on expert opinion. Also can be based on benchmarking, where you compare the project in question to similar past project or industry standard to make decision. The scope, this is for example when planning a software development projects, the project manager may benchmark against industry norms to set realistic deadlines. So also based on other available product. They say we very poor product, so they decided to come up with a project to improve the similar product, which is improve quality and so on. So it can be based on SWOT analysis. You identify the strength, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and the threats of the project. So you make a decision based on the SWOT analysis. So there's no numbers involved. So you are based on qualitative measure. So based on this brainstorm. For the numeric selection methods, there are a couple of ways to do this. Through financial assessment methods. This is based on the payback period. So you are looking into whether the project will benefit in terms of profit. It's based on also discounted cash flow, how much money that you receive every year. So whether that money can recover your initial investment. So they call it financial assessment methods. And the second one is through scoring methods. So you given some value to the project and all the activities. From there you will identify whether the project is worth to be implemented or not. So the payback period, this is where it is the time necessary to recover the cost of the invested in the project. So you invest, for example, 1 million. So you will look into how the payback period will be calculated. Whether at the end of the project term, you should be able to gain some profit. So basically, the payback period is time frame that is required for the return of investment, or ROI, to repay the original cost that was invested. So it is based on ratio of the total investment to the annual net cash inflow. So it's just initial fixed investment divided by the annual net cash inflow. So this is used to evaluate whether the project is worth to be implemented. So these are example of it by using discounted cash flow. So they call it, they give a formula of NPV, where NPV means net present value, which has such a formula, minus I naught plus the sum of t from 1 to n, ft divided by 1 plus k over t. So if you put on all the values, if the positive NPV, that means it's good investment. So you base on the value of the calculated formula. So if it's produce a positive value, so it's good. So you can implement the project. So where IO is the initial investment, FT is the net cash flow in period T, K the required rate of return or the hurdle rate. So this is an example of discounted cash flow based on the numeric decision. So example, real estate investment, suppose investors considering buying a rental property which costs around 150,000. The expected rental income over 5 years is as follow. Year 1, 20,000. year 2 21,000, year 3, and so on. So assuming a discount rate of 6%, right? The discount rate 6%, in this case will be used as K, the required rate of return or hurdle rate. So NPV, you just put the value and do the calculation. So in this scenario, with the IO is 150,000, the yearly cash inflow within 20,000 to 24 within 5 years, with a discount rate of 6%. So you will get around NPV a positive 4,736 and 78 cents. So this indicate that NPV is positive, which indicate the worth of the investment to the following properties. So a positive NPV suggests that investment is expected to generate a return greater than the initial investment, making it a financially favorable decision. So once you have this formula, so you are able to make decision whether you want to implement the project or not. Another method of numeric selection methods is based on weighted scoring model. I won't go through to this formula, so I'm just going to show you the example. Okay, so the example here, table the criteria, important criteria, in this case 5 important criteria, right, for that particular project. So each important criteria will be given a weightage 1, 2, and 3. 3 means the highest priority. This is very important criteria for the implementation of the project. 1 means important, but it is less important. So you give a weightage to this particular criteria. So when you do the evaluation, so you will give a score for this particular criteria, right? For example, for project 1, criteria 1, it can be profit, it can be a cost, right? So you or the other members can give you give a score of this criteria by looking at all the criteria. For example, project 1, you give 3, you give a score 3, right? This is fixed. This is where you fix the weightage value, right? And this is the score that you are given based on the criteria for this particular project. So you given 3 for criteria 1, criteria 2 you give also 3, criteria 3 you give 2, and criteria 4 you give 2, and criteria 5 for project 1 you give 1. So by multiplying the score with the weightage, so you will get the weighted score. So for criteria 1, project 1, you will get 9. Criteria 2 for project 1, you will get 6 based on the score and the weightage, and so on. The total weighted score sum up will be 24 for project 1. And you will do the same thing to project 2, and you give the score, and you will obtain the total project score 18. And for project 3, in this case, it will receive total score of 21. So based on these methods, you will choose project 1 to be implemented based on the highest number of the score. So this is basically how you decide whether you want to implement the project based on non-numeric and also numeric based on numbers. There are also a software, they call it Crystal Ball. It's a spreadsheet based application to do some predictive modeling and also forecasting and also simulation and optimization. So it will give some insight into the critical factors affecting the risk. So this is another application that you can use to identify whether the project is worth to be implemented or not. So you will not be shown, or you not be explained on how to use this crystal ball. Maybe you can find in the other resources on crystal ball application, where they can use to identify the worthiness of the project, whether it should be implemented or not. So just to say that there are software for you to use to determine whether projects is worth to be implemented or not. So we are nearly at the end of the week one topics. So on the project portfolio. So in project management, they will use project portfolio to show that how to manage multiple projects, because sometimes if you are project manager, you not only manage one project, you might also involve in managing more than one project. So a project portfolio definition is a collection of sets of projects. So there are multiple projects that you are involved with, so they call it project portfolio. A set of project, programs, or initiative that an organization or entity is currently undertaking or planning to undertake. So it can be a program that are typically managed collectively as a group, because they share the strategic goals, resources, and oversight. They might also have multiple project manager for a different project, so they need to work together in that sense. And this project profile allows organization to prioritize, monitor, and optimize their project related activities in alignment with their strategic objective. So project portfolio management has become a key component in organization as they look to enhance their ability to manage multiple projects in an efficient and effective way. So usually a project portfolio process involves a number of steps. Number one, establish a project council or team members. This is where they make some of the decision. Step number two involve identify project categories and criteria. Step number three, collect project data, whatever project data that can be used to monitor or to identify any problem or any issues regarding project implementation. Step 4 is assess the resource availability. So it's very important to identify what are resources that is available to implement this project. And step number 5 include reduce the project and criteria set. Maybe you will look into how you can optimize resources. Step number 6, to prioritize the project within the categories. That means you have multiple projects, so you will need to decide which project will have the highest priority to be implemented first. Some maybe can implemented later, and so on. Step number 7, you will need to be able to select the project which will be funded, or some will be reserved or put into a hold, whether you want to implement it or not. And then step number 8, you can start implementing all the processes of all the project requirement. So usually they also call aggregate project plan. That means there are many project plan which consider as APP, where is the process to position many of the projects in terms of the extent of product and process changes. So the purpose is to ensure that each project, we are talking about multiple project, will accomplish its objective in line with organization goals. So there are 4 separate categories of project identified. In this case, number 1, derivative project, platform project, breakthrough project, or R&D project. So here is the example of how the aggregate project plan is implemented. So in R&D project, it will involve number of resources, number of funding. Here you have R&D project, and here you have breakthrough project, and here you have a derivative project. The size mean the number of people work within this one. So by looking at this project, so you should be able to identify some of the tasks to be implemented by this aggregate project plan. So we have reached the end of the PM1 topics, basic understanding of project management. So in summary, you should be able to identify or define the project and the characteristic of the project. And in this topic also we talk about why project management is very important and why it is required in order to perform any project of producing product, services, and also process. And it's also very important to identify or understand the characteristics and skills requirement for project managers in order for them to manage the project. Not only as a project manager, so as a project manager you should be able to understand what are the project constraints, what are the uncertainties and the risk. By understanding this, you should be able to make sure the planning of the project execution can be implemented successfully and the project can be completed successfully. Initiating project decision is very important, or the need to implement a project or why it is needed. So making sure that the scope of the project is clear, the objective of the projects are clear, so that it will not affect during the project implementation or execution. And by managing bigger projects, it's called a project portfolio. So you are responsible sometimes not only involved in one project, you might also involve in multiple projects. So this is where the importance to identify the resources needed for such a bigger project implementation in project portfolio. So with that, thank you very much. So I will see you in class and to discuss about what I have lectured. So thank you very much. I hope to see you soon.